The pink hair tie bounced gently against Emily Richardson's neck as she walked through the gates of Fort Braxton Military Academy. Around her, perfectly pressed uniforms and regulation haircuts created a sea of olive green and navy blue. Her simple pony tie, secured with that bright pink elastic, seemed to glow like a neon sign in the pre-dawn darkness. "Look at Barbie," someone whispered behind her. "Did she get lost on her way to cheerleader tryouts?" Emily kept walking, her combat boots making soft thuds against the concrete. She'd heard it all before. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm shrieked at 500 hours, just as it had every morning for the past 3 weeks at Fort Braxton. Emily Richardson rolled out of her narrow bunk, feet hitting the cold concrete floor of Barracks C. Around her, 30 other recruits scrambled in the darkness, the sound of hurried movements and muffled complaints filling the air. "Move it! Move it! Move it!" Drill Sergeant Martinez's voice echoed down the corridor, boots pounding against the floor like thunder. "You have 4 minutes to be in formation." Emily pulled on her fatigues with practiced efficiency, fingers working quickly through the familiar routine. As she reached for her hair tie, her bunkmate Jessica Chen glanced over from the neighboring bed. "Still wearing that thing?" Jessica asked, nodding toward the pink elastic. "You know Sergeant Martinez is going to notice eventually." "It's within regulation," Emily replied quietly, pulling her dark hair back into a tight ponytail. "No specific color restrictions in the manual." "Technically, maybe," said Marcus Torres from across the aisle, "but you're just painting a target on your back. Why make things harder for yourself?" Emily didn't respond. She'd learned early in life that explaining herself rarely changed people's minds. Better to let her actions speak instead. The recruits filed out into the pre-dawn darkness, breath visible in small puffs of steam. Fort Braxton stretched across 2,000 acres of North Carolina wilderness, its buildings arranged in precise military order. The obstacle course loomed in the distance, barely visible in the dim light from the perimeter floodlights. Drill Sergeant Martinez stood at attention in front of the formation, his imposing figure casting a long shadow. At 6'4" with arms like tree trunks, he commanded respect through presence alone. His eyes swept across the assembled recruits, pausing momentarily when they reached Emily. "Richardson," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the silent formation. "Front and center." Emily stepped forward, spine straight, eyes focused ahead. She could feel the weight of 30 pairs of eyes on her and could practically hear her fellow recruits holding their breath. Martinez circled her slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. "Interesting choice of hair accessory, Richardson. Planning to coordinate with your weapon today?" A few snickers rippled through the formation. Emily's jaw tightened almost imperceptible, but she kept her voice steady. "No excuse, Drill Sergeant. No excuse," repeated, stopping directly in front of her. "That's right, because there is no excuse for looking like you're heading to a tea party instead of military training." He leaned closer, voice dropping to just above a whisper. "Some of these recruits think this is summer camp, Richardson. They think they can coast through on daddy's money or mommy's connections. What do you think?" "I think actions matter more than appearances, Drill Sergeant." Martinez's eyebrows raised slightly. "Actions, you say? Well then, let's see some action. You'll be a point person for today's weapons training exercise. Hope you've been paying attention." Emily nodded once, sharply. "Yes, Drill Sergeant." As Martinez dismissed the formation, the recruits began moving toward the training grounds. Emily fell into step with the group, ignoring the whispered comments that followed in her wake. "She's done for," muttered Dylan Brooks, a recruit from Texas whose father had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. "I heard she scored highest on the written exams," Jessica whispered back. "Book smarts don't mean anything when you're handling real weapons," replied Sarah Kim, who'd grown up on a military base in Georgia. "This isn't multiple choice." The weapons training facility sat at the heart of Fort Braxton, a massive concrete structure that housed everything from basic pistols to advanced rifle systems. Inside, the air smelled of gun oil and metal, a sharp, clean scent that spoke of precision and discipline. Tables lined the center of the room, each holding a disassembled M4 carbine. The weapon's components lay arranged in neat rows: upper receiver, lower receiver, bolt carrier group, charging handle, buffer spring, and dozens of smaller parts that together formed one of the military's most reliable firearms. Instructor Williams, a compact woman with graying hair and steady hands, stood at the front of the room. Today, you'll demonstrate field stripping and reassembly of the M4 carbine. Isn't just about memorizing parts. In combat situations, your weapon is your lifeline. You need to know it better than you know yourself. The recruits spread out among the tables, most gravitating toward the middle and back of the room. Emily found herself at a table near the front, her pink hair tie catching the harsh fluorescent light. Standard time for a competent soldier is 2 minutes for complete field strip and reassembly, Williams continued. You'll have 5 minutes. Anyone who can't complete the task will be recycled to repeat this phase of training. A collective intake of breath swept through the room. Being recycled meant falling behind, extending training time, and facing questions about competence that followed soldiers throughout their careers. Richardson, Sergeant Martinez called from his position near the door, "Since you're so confident about actions mattering, you'll demonstrate first." Emily moved to the table, her hands hovering over the disassembled weapon. Around her, the room fell silent except for the hum of ventilation systems. She could feel the weight of expectation, the assumption that she would fail, that the girl with the pink hair tie didn't belong in this world of steel and precision. Her fingers found the upper receiver first, movements flowing with unexpected grace. She'd studied the weapon's mechanics obsessively, not just from the manual, but from technical specifications, engineering diagrams, and maintenance records. Where other recruits saw a collection of parts, Emily saw an elegant system of interconnected components. The bolt carrier group slid into place with a soft click. Her hands moved without hesitation, muscle memory guiding each motion, despite having only practiced this assembly a dozen times. The charging handle followed, then the buffer spring, each piece finding its proper position in the sequence. 1 minute 30 seconds, Williams announced. Emily's pace never wavered. The trigger guard snapped into position, followed by the magazine release and safety selector. Her movements were economical, precise, no wasted motion or fumbled connections. 2 minutes 15 seconds. The final components came together in a symphony of clicking metal. Emily stepped back, the fully assembled M4 carbine resting on the table before her. She'd finished 15 seconds faster than the standard time for experienced soldiers. The room remained silent for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. Then Williams nodded slowly, a hint of something that might have been approval crossing her weathered features. "Acceptable," she said simply. "Next." As Emily returned to her position, she caught glimpses of her fellow recruits' faces. The casual dismissal had been replaced by something else: surprise, perhaps even respect. Dylan Brooks was staring at her hands, as if trying to figure out how they'd moved so quickly. Sarah Kim's expression had shifted from skepticism to curiosity. But it was Sergeant Martinez's reaction that mattered most. He stood near the doorway, arms crossed, studying Emily with the intensity of a hawk watching a mouse that had just done something unexpected. His face revealed nothing, but Emily caught the slight narrowing of his eyes, the way his weight shifted almost imperceptibly forward. The next recruit stepped up to demonstrate, hands shaking slightly as they reached for the upper receiver. The comparison was stark. Where Emily's movements had flowed like water, this recruit's were halting, uncertain. Parts clinked together awkwardly, and twice the charging handle slipped from nervous fingers. "Time," Williams called as the 5-minute limit expired. The recruit stepped back, weapon only partially assembled, face flushed with embarrassment. One by one, the other recruits took their turns. A few managed successful assemblies, though none matched Emily's speed or confidence. Most struggled, fighting with stubborn components and second-guessing their knowledge under pressure. Jessica completed the assembly with 3 seconds to spare, earning a nod of approval from Williams. Marcus Torres finished cleanly but slowly, his methodical approach eating up precious time. Dylan Brooks, despite his military family background, fumbled the bolt carrier group twice and barely finished within the time limit. When the last recruit had finished, Williams surveyed the room. 8 successful assemblies out of 30 recruits. That's a 27% pass rate. Her voice carried no emotion, but the disappointment was clear. For those who failed, you'll have additional training sessions until you meet standards. This exercise will be repeated in 3 days. As the recruits began filing out, Sergeant Martinez's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "Richardson, stay behind." Emily remained at attention as the room emptied, the sound of boots on concrete fading into silence. Martinez approached slowly, his expression unreadable. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked finally. "Study and practice, drill sergeant." "Study and practice," Martinez repeated. "Just like that?" Emily met his gaze steadily. "Yes, drill sergeant." Martinez walked a slow circle around her, just as he had during morning formation. "You know, Richardson, I've been training recruits for 15 years. I can usually spot the ones who'll wash out in the first week. Too soft, too privileged, too distracted by things that don't matter." He paused directly in front of her. "I had you pegged for washing out by day 10. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Emily said nothing. "But that assembly time," Martinez continued, "that was impressive. Not just the speed, the confidence. You handled that weapon like you'd been working with it for months." He leaned closer. "So, I'm going to ask you again, where did you learn to do that?" "I read the technical manuals, drill sergeant, multiple times. I memorized the component specifications and practiced the sequences in my head." Martinez's eyebrows rose slightly. "In your head?" "Yes, drill sergeant, mental rehearsal. I visualized each step until the muscle memory developed." "Mental rehearsal?" Martinez stepped back, studying her with new interest. "And the pink hair tie? What's the story there?" For the first time since the conversation began, Emily hesitated. The question touched on something personal, something that had nothing to do with military protocol or weapons training. "It was my sister's, drill sergeant," she said finally. "She wore it every day before she deployed to Afghanistan. She didn't come back." The room fell silent. Martinez's expression softened almost imperceptibly, a crack in the drill sergeant facade revealing something more human underneath. "I see," he said quietly. "And you wear it to remember her?" "I wear it to remind myself why I'm here, drill sergeant." Martinez nodded slowly. "What was her name?" "Staff Sergeant Lisa Richardson, drill sergeant, Army Corps of Engineers." "Engineers?" Martinez repeated. "That explains the technical approach." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Richardson, tomorrow we're doing advanced weapon systems. Think you can handle something more challenging than an M4? "Yes, drill sergeant." "Good, because I'm planning something special." Martinez's smile was sharp, predatory. Something that will test whether that performance today was luck or skill. As Martinez left the training facility, Emily remained standing at attention for a long moment. Through the windows, she could see her fellow recruits gathering for evening meal, their voices carrying across the courtyard. She touched the pink hair tie gently, feeling the familiar texture of the worn elastic. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself. But for now, she has passed the first test. The girl with the pink hair tie was still standing. The next morning brought an unusual change to the routine. Instead of the standard obstacle course, the recruits found themselves marched to Building 47, a restricted facility on the far side of Fort Braxton that most had only seen from a distance. The structure looked more like a high-tech laboratory than a military training building, with reinforced walls and windows that reflected the early morning sun like mirrors. "Welcome to the Advanced Weapons Systems Center," announced Colonel Patricia Hayes as she emerged from the building's main entrance. At 52, Hayes commanded respect through reputation rather than intimidation. She'd spent 20 years in military intelligence before transitioning to weapons development, and her calm demeanor masked a mind that understood warfare at levels most soldiers never glimpsed. The recruits stood at attention, but Emily noticed the subtle tension in their postures. This wasn't part of the standard training curriculum. Whatever they were about to face, it wasn't in any manual they'd studied. Today's exercise will separate those who merely follow instructions from those who truly understand their craft, Hayes continued, her voice carrying easily across the formation. Inside this facility, you'll encounter weapon systems that require not just technical knowledge, but adaptive thinking and problem-solving under pressure. She gestured toward the building behind her. The scenarios you'll face are classified, but I can tell you this: they're based on real situations our forces have encountered in recent operations. Success requires more than memorization. It requires intuition. Drill Sergeant Martinez stepped forward. Recruits will enter the facility in groups of 5. Each group will have 30 minutes to complete their assigned scenario. Failure means immediate review and potential dismissal from the program. Emily felt her stomach tighten. Around her, she could hear the barely audible intake of breath from her fellow recruits. This wasn't just another training exercise. It was an elimination round. First group, Martinez called out, consulting his clipboard. Richardson, Torres, Chen, Brooks, Kim. Emily's group moved toward the building entrance, their boots echoing against the concrete walkway. As they approached the heavy steel doors, Colonel Hayes fell in step beside them. "A word of advice," she said quietly. "In there, rank doesn't matter. Neither does size, gender, or background. What matters is how quickly you can assess a situation and adapt. The weapon doesn't care who's holding it. It only responds to competence." The doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor lined with biometric scanners and security cameras. Their footsteps seemed muffled by the advanced acoustics of the building's interior, creating an almost surreal atmosphere. They were led to a briefing room where Major Robert Klein waited behind a metal table. Klein looked like he'd stepped out of a recruitment poster, square jaw, perfect posture, and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the recruits standing before him. "Your scenario is designated Code Red Alpha," Klein began without preamble. "A forward operating base has been overrun. The armory is compromised, with weapons scattered and damaged. Your team must assess available equipment, determine what's operational, and prepare defenses using only what you can salvage." He gestured to a wall-mounted screen that flickered to life, showing a 3D layout of what appeared to be a bombed-out military compound. "Time constraint. Enemy forces are approaching. You have 25 minutes to establish a defensive position and demonstrate tactical readiness." The screen went dark, and Klein moved toward the door. "Your equipment bay is through that corridor. The timer starts when you enter." He paused at the threshold. "One more thing. Communication systems are down. No radios, no coordination with command. You're on your own." The 5 recruits exchanged glances as Klein disappeared down the hallway. Jessica was the first to speak. "Okay, so we need to move fast and work together. Does anyone have experience with damaged equipment assessment?" "I've done some mechanical work, cars mostly, but the principles might apply." Dylan shook his head. "This isn't about fixing engines. We're talking about military hardware, completely different systems." "Different components, same logic," Emily said quietly. "Identify the problem, assess available resources, adapt the solution to fit the constraints." Sarah looked skeptical. "That sounds like textbook theory. This is supposed to be based on real combat situations." "Then we better stop talking and start moving," Emily replied, already heading toward the corridor Klein had indicated. The equipment bay looked like a tornado had torn through a military supply depot. Weapons lay scattered across metal tables and the floor, some clearly damaged, others appearing intact but potentially unreliable. Ammunition boxes were overturned, their contents spilled in chaotic piles. The air smelled of cordite and machine oil. "Jesus," Dylan whispered, surveying the destruction. "Where do we even start?" Emily was already moving through the debris, her eyes scanning the available equipment with systematic precision. We start by categorizing what we have. Operational weapons here, damaged but potentially repairable there, complete losses in that corner. "Who made you team leader?" Sarah asked, but she was already following Emily's direction, gathering weapons from the floor. "No one," Emily replied, lifting a rifle with a bent barrel. "But standing around debating chain of command isn't going to get us ready for whatever's coming." Marcus found himself drawn to Emily's methodical approach. "What are you looking for specifically?" "Functionality over condition," Emily answered, setting aside a pristine-looking pistol after a quick inspection revealed a cracked firing pin. "A scratched weapon that fires reliably is worth 10 perfect ones that jam." Jessica held up an assault rifle with a damaged stock. "This one's got a good barrel and action, but the stock is cracked." "Tape it," Emily said without looking up from her own inspection. "Field expedient repairs. Function first. Aesthetics never." The minutes ticked by with increasing urgency. Dylan and Sarah focused on ammunition, sorting through scattered rounds to find compatible types and sufficient quantities. Marcus worked on mounting systems, trying to jerry-rig bipods and scopes onto weapons that had lost their original accessories. Emily moved between stations, her hands quick and sure as she tested firing mechanisms, checked barrel alignments, and assessed each weapon's tactical value. What surprised the others was her ability to make rapid decisions without second-guessing herself. "This one's good," she announced, setting aside a carbine that looked worse for wear but functioned smoothly. "This one's scrap." Another rifle joined the discard pile despite appearing nearly undamaged. "How can you tell so fast?" Jessica asked, genuinely curious. Emily picked up the discarded rifle and demonstrated. "Watch the bolt action. See how it doesn't seat completely? That's a timing issue. In sustained fire, it'll jam every few rounds. Under pressure, that delay gets you killed." With 10 minutes remaining, they had identified 8 functional weapons and sufficient ammunition for a defensive engagement. But Emily was still moving through the equipment bay, her eyes searching for something specific. "We need to set up positions," Dylan urged. "Time's running out." "Not yet," Emily replied, pulling components from different containers. "We're missing something critical." "What?" Marcus asked. Emily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she began assembling something from parts she'd gathered, pieces that had seemed unrelated but now fit together with mechanical precision. Her hands moved with the same fluid confidence they'd shown during the M4 assembly, but faster, more urgently. "Holy shit," Sarah breathed, recognizing what Emily was building. "Is that a automatic grenade launcher?" Emily finished, snapping the final components into place. "Modified MK-19, reconfigured for rapid deployment." She tested the mounting mechanism with quick, practiced movements. "This changes our defensive options completely." The others stared at the weapon Emily had assembled from scattered parts. It looked like nothing any of them had seen in their training manuals, a hybrid system that shouldn't have been possible to construct from the damaged equipment available. "Where did you learn to do that?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily was already positioning the launcher at a strategic point overlooking the simulated approach routes shown in the briefing. "Problem solving," she said simply. "See what you have, understand what you need, find a way to bridge the gap." "But that's not standard procedure," Dylan protested. "We're supposed to follow established protocols." Emily looked at him directly. "The protocol is to complete the mission. Everything else is just a method." Colonel Hayes's voice crackled through hidden speakers. 2 minutes remaining. Prepare for evaluation." The team scrambled to their positions, weapons ready, fields of fire established. Emily remained at the improvised grenade launcher, her pink hair tie bright against the military equipment surrounding her. But now, none of her teammates were looking at that hair tie with amusement or dismissal. They were looking at it with something approaching awe. "Contact front," Hayes announced through the speakers. "Multiple hostile targets approaching from the north perimeter." The simulation began in earnest. Targets appeared on screens positioned around the room, requiring split-second decisions about engagement priorities and ammunition conservation. Emily's teammates performed competently, but it was her position that dominated the scenario. The modified grenade launcher operated with devastating efficiency, eliminating multiple targets with each precisely aimed shot. But more than the weapon's effectiveness, it was Emily's tactical awareness that set her apart. She called out target priorities, coordinated fields of fire, and adapted to changing threats with an intuition that seemed almost supernatural. "Ceasefire," Hayes commanded, after what felt like hours but had lasted only minutes. The room fell silent except for the hum of ventilation systems. Emily stepped back from the launcher, her breathing steady despite the intensity of the simulation. Around her, her teammates were still processing what they'd just witnessed. Major Klein entered the equipment bay, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the scene. His eyes lingered on the modified launcher, then moved to Emily. "Interesting solution," he said finally. "Where did you find the components for that configuration?" "They were here, scattered, damaged, but functional. The mounting system came from a destroyed machine gun nest, the firing mechanism from a damaged mortar tube, and the targeting system from a broken rocket launcher." Klein nodded slowly. "And you recognized the compatibility potential immediately?" "The engineering principles are consistent across platforms," Emily said. "Once you understand the underlying mechanics, adaptation becomes a matter of creative application." "Creative application," Klein repeated, a hint of something that might have been approval in his voice. He moved to examine the launcher more closely, running his hands along the improvised connections Emily had created. "This shouldn't work," he murmured, almost to himself. "But it does," Emily said quietly. Klein looked up at her, and for the first time since the exercise began, he smiled. "Yes," he said, "it does indeed." Word spread through Fort Braxton like wildfire. By evening chow, every recruit in the facility had heard some version of what happened in the Advanced Weapons Systems Center. The details grew more elaborate with each telling. Emily had supposedly built a cannon from spare parts, single-handedly defeated an army of simulated enemies, or performed some other impossible feat that defied military logic. But the recruits who had been there knew the truth was somehow more impressive than any exaggeration. Emily sat alone at her usual table in the mess hall, picking at her regular meatloaf, while conversations buzzed around her. The pink hair tie seemed to catch every stray beam of fluorescent light, but the whispered comments had changed in tone. Where once there had been mockery, now there was curiosity mixed with something approaching awe. "Mind if I sit here?" Emily looked up to find Captain Lisa Nakamura standing beside her table, tray in hand. Nakamura was a legend at Fort Braxton, a decorated combat veteran who'd served 3 tours in Iraq before returning stateside to head the facility's tactical instruction program. She never ate with recruits. "Of course, Captain," Emily replied, straightening slightly in her seat. Nakamura settled across from her, cutting into her own meatloaf with military precision. "Heard you had an interesting day at Building 47. Emily nodded, but didn't elaborate. She'd learned early that speaking too much often led to trouble. "Colonel Hayes called me about an hour ago," Nakamura continued conversationally. "Said she wanted to discuss something called exceptional performance beyond training parameters, her exact words." She looked up from her meal. "That phrase gets used maybe once every few years around here." "I just did what the situation required, Captain." Nakamura smiled, an expression that transformed her usually stern features. "That's exactly what Hayes said you'd say." She leaned back in her chair, studying Emily with new interest. "Tell me something, Richardson. What do you see when you look at a weapon?" The question caught Emily off guard. "Ma'am?" Simple question. Most recruits see a tool, something to be cleaned and maintained according to regulations. Others see protection, a way to keep themselves and their teammates safe. A few see it as power, something that makes them dangerous. Nakamura's eyes were steady, patient. "What do you see?" Emily considered the question carefully. Around them, the mess hall continued its evening routine, but their conversation had created a bubble of quiet intensity. "I see a system," Emily said finally. "Components working together to achieve a specific function. Like a puzzle where every piece has a purpose, and if you understand how they interact, you can predict behavior, identify weaknesses, optimize performance. Interesting. Nakamura took another bite of meatloaf, chewing thoughtfully. And when that system is broken, then you figure out which pieces still work and find new ways to put them together. Even if it's never been done before? Emily met her gaze directly, especially then. Nakamura nodded slowly, as if Emily had confirmed something she'd already suspected. I'm going to tell you something, Richardson, but this conversation stays between us. Understood? Yes, Captain. There's going to be a special evaluation next week, not part of the standard training curriculum. A joint exercise with Special Operations Command. Nakamura's voice dropped slightly. They're looking for recruits with unconventional thinking patterns, people who can solve problems that don't have textbook solutions. Emily felt her pulse quicken, but kept her expression neutral. What kind of evaluation? The kind where following regulations gets you killed, and creative thinking keeps you alive. Nakamura stood, picking up her tray. Hayes recommended you for participation. I endorsed the recommendation. She paused. Don't make us look foolish. As Nakamura walked away, Emily sat alone with her thoughts and the remains of her dinner. Around her, the mess hall was emptying as recruits headed to evening activities or back to the barracks. She touched the pink hair tie absently, a gesture that had become unconscious over the years. Lisa would have loved this place, she thought. Her sister had always thrived on challenges that pushed beyond conventional limits. It was what made her such an effective combat engineer, and ultimately what got her killed when she volunteered for a mission everyone else considered too dangerous. Emily was still lost in memory when someone cleared their throat behind her. She turned to Marcus Torres standing nearby, looking unusually serious. "Can we talk?" he asked. Emily gestured to the empty chair across from her. Marcus sat down heavily, his expression troubled. "I've been thinking about what happened today," he began. "That launcher you built, where did you really learn to do that?" "I told you, problem-solving and mechanical knowledge." Marcus shook his head. "No, that's not enough. I've got mechanical knowledge too, but I couldn't have seen what you saw in those parts. Hell, I'm not sure anyone could have." He leaned forward. "So I'm asking again, where did you learn that?" Emily studied his face, trying to read his intentions. Marcus had been one of the few recruits who'd treated her with basic respect from the beginning, never joining in the jokes about her appearance or background. "My sister was a combat engineer," she said finally. "When she was home on leave, she'd show me things. Not classified stuff, just principles. How systems work together, how to improvise when standard solutions aren't available." "Your sister," Marcus repeated. "The one who—" "Died in Afghanistan, yes." Emily's voice was steady, but Marcus caught the slight tightening around her eyes. She was part of an explosive ordnance disposal team. Improvised explosive devices, booby traps, unexploded munitions. She had to think creatively every single day because the enemy was always finding new ways to kill our people. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry." She knew the risks. We all did. Emily picked up her water glass, turning it slowly in her hands. "But she taught me that engineering isn't just about following blueprints. It's about understanding systems well enough to modify them when circumstances change." "Is that why you're here? To follow in her footsteps?" Emily considered the question. It wasn't one she'd examined closely, even in her own mind. "I'm here because someone needs to be. Because the people who protect this country deserve teammates who won't give up when things get complicated." Marcus nodded slowly. "That launcher you built today, Lisa would have been proud of that?" For the first time since the conversation began, Emily smiled. "She would have improved on it and then shown me 3 different ways to make it better." That evening, Emily lay in her narrow bunk listening to the sounds of 30 other recruits settling into sleep. Jessica Chen's breathing had already settled into the steady rhythm of deep sleep. Across the aisle, Dylan Brooks was reading something by flashlight, probably a letter from home. Emily stared at the ceiling, her mind turning over the day's events. Captain Nakamura's words echoed in her thoughts. A special evaluation with Special Operations Command. The kind of test where creative thinking mattered more than following rules. She'd spent her entire life being underestimated, dismissed as too small, too young, too feminine, too unconventional. The pink hair tie was just the most visible symbol of all the ways she didn't fit the expected mold. But today, for the first time, those differences had been seen as assets rather than liabilities. Her sister's voice seemed to whisper in the darkness. "Don't let them put you in a box, Em. The moment you accept their limitations, you stop growing." Emily reached up to touch the hair tie, feeling the familiar texture of the worn elastic. Lisa had worn it through 2 combat deployments, through training exercises that pushed her to her limits, through situations where improvisation meant the difference between life and death. Now it was Emily's turn to prove that unconventional thinking could be a weapon as powerful as any rifle or launcher. The special evaluation would be her chance to show that the girl with the pink hair tie wasn't just surviving military training, she was redefining what it meant to be a soldier. 3 bunks away, someone was snoring softly. The base's perimeter lights cast long shadows through the barracks windows, creating patterns that shifted with the movement of clouds across the moon. Emily closed her eyes and began visualizing weapon systems, breaking them down into component parts and rebuilding them in new configurations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself. But tonight, she would prepare the way Lisa had taught her, by understanding every system so thoroughly that innovation became instinct. The pink hair tie bobbed gently as she finally drifted toward sleep, and in her dreams, she was building impossible machines from scattered pieces, each one more elegant and effective than anything in the technical manuals. In Building 47, Colonel Hayes was reviewing the day's performance evaluations with Major Klein. The modified grenade launcher sat disassembled on a table between them, its improvised components spread out like evidence in a case they were trying to solve. "Intelligence quotient is off the charts," Hayes was saying, consulting her tablet. "But more than that, she demonstrates spatial reasoning abilities that exceed our testing parameters." Klein picked up one of the launcher components, examining the makeshift connections Emily had created. "What's her background? Family military?" "My sister was KIA in Afghanistan. Combat engineer, explosive ordnance disposal." Hayes scrolled through Emily's file. "Parents deceased, no other immediate family. She's been on her own since she turned 18. That explains the self-reliance." Klein set down the component and looked at Hayes directly. "What are you thinking?" Hayes smiled, the expression sharp and predatory. "I'm thinking we accelerate her timeline. The special operations evaluation isn't for another week, but I want to see what she can do when the stakes get even higher." "You mean the blindfold test?" "I mean everything." Hayes's eyes gleamed with the intensity of someone who just discovered a weapon more dangerous than anything in Fort Braxton's arsenal. "Let's see exactly what Emily Richardson is capable of." The call came at 0430 hours, 2 hours before the standard wake-up alarm. Emily jerked awake to find Drill Sergeant Martinez standing beside her bunk, his silhouette backlit by the corridor lights. "Richardson, gear up. Full combat load. You have 3 minutes." Around her, the other recruits remained asleep, undisturbed by Martinez's whispered command. Emily rolled out of bed silently, muscle memory guiding her through the familiar routine of dressing and equipment check. Her hands found the pink hair tie in the darkness, securing it around her ponytail with practiced efficiency. Martinez led her through corridors she'd never seen before, deeper into Fort Braxton's restricted areas. Their footsteps echoed against concrete walls lined with security cameras and biometric scanners. The air grew cooler as they descended, suggesting they were moving underground. "Where are we going, Drill Sergeant?" Emily asked quietly. "Somewhere you can't embarrass the entire training program," Martinez replied without looking back. "Today's exercise isn't in any manual you've studied." They stopped before a heavy steel door marked only with a red triangle and a series of numbers Emily didn't recognize. Martinez placed his palm against a scanner, waited for the green light, then pulled the door open. The room beyond looked like something from a science fiction movie. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens flickering with data streams Emily couldn't immediately interpret. In the center of the space, a raised platform held equipment she'd never seen before, weapons that seemed to exist at the intersection of current technology and future possibility. Colonel Hayes stood near one of the computer stations, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. Beside her, a man Emily didn't recognize studied readouts on multiple monitors simultaneously. He was older than Hayes, probably in his 60s, with silver hair and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings. "Richardson," Hayes called out, "come meet Dr. Samuel Morrison." Emily approached the platform, her combat boots silent against the rubberized flooring. Dr. Morrison turned to face her, his expression neutral but intensely focused. "So, you're the recruit who's been causing such a stir," Morrison said. "I've reviewed the footage from yesterday's exercise. Quite impressive." "Thank you, sir." Morrison smiled, but there was something calculating in the expression. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't heard what we're planning." He gestured toward the equipment on the platform. "Dr. Morrison heads our Advanced Combat Systems Research Division," Hayes explained. "He's been developing next-generation weapons platforms for special operations units." Emily's eyes moved across the assembled equipment. Unlike the familiar rifles and pistols from her training, these weapons incorporated technologies she could only guess at. Optical systems that seemed to bend light, barrel assemblies that suggested electromagnetic rather than chemical propulsion, targeting computers that looked more like spacecraft instruments than military hardware. "The challenge," Morrison continued, "is that these systems are so advanced that traditional training methods don't apply. Soldiers spend months learning to operate them effectively, and even then, most never achieve true proficiency." He picked up what appeared to be a rifle, but its proportions were wrong, its weight distribution unlike anything in Emily's experience. "This is the XM47 Advanced Combat Rifle. It incorporates smart ammunition, adaptive targeting, and battlefield networking capabilities. The average soldier requires 40 hours of training just to achieve basic operational competency." Emily accepted the weapon when Morrison offered it, immediately noting its unusual balance and the way its grip seemed to adjust to her hand size. The targeting system activated as her fingers found the trigger guard, displaying information she couldn't yet interpret. "Your task," Hayes said, "is to demonstrate combat-effective usage of 3 different advanced systems within the next 2 hours. No instruction manual, no training videos, no guidance beyond basic safety protocols." Emily looked up from the rifle. "What's the purpose of this test?" "To determine whether intuitive weapons handling can overcome technological complexity," Morrison replied. "To see if someone with your particular talents can bridge the gap between human adaptability and machine precision." Martinez, who had remained silent near the door, finally spoke. "Richardson, this isn't standard training. You can decline if you want to return to normal curriculum." Emily met his gaze, then looked back at the advanced rifle in her hands. Its systems hummed quietly, waiting for input she didn't yet understand how to provide. "I'll try," she said simply. The first hour was frustrating. The XM47's targeting system responded to inputs she couldn't predict, displaying information in formats she'd never encountered. The smart ammunition required programming she didn't understand, and the weapon's adaptive features seemed designed for someone with years of specialized training. But gradually, patterns began to emerge. The targeting display updated based on her eye movements, suggesting a biometric interface. The ammunition programming responded to pressure variations in her grip, indicating intuitive rather than manual control systems. Weapon was designed to learn from its user, adapting to their natural tendencies rather than requiring them to adapt to it. Morrison watched from his position near the computers, occasionally making notes but offering no guidance. Hayes observed silently, her expression unreadable. Martinez paced near the door, clearly uncomfortable with the deviation from standard protocols. "Dr. Morrison," Emily said during a brief pause, This rifle is designed to interface with existing neural pathways, isn't it? Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. What makes you think that? The way it responds to unconscious inputs. The targeting system tracks micro-movements I'm not even aware of making. Emily demonstrated, shifting her weight slightly and watching the display adjust accordingly. It's not just reading my actions, it's reading my intentions. Interesting observation, Morrison replied neutrally. Continue with your evaluation. By the second hour, Emily had achieved something Morrison's team had previously seen only in soldiers with extensive advanced training. She was operating the XM-47 with fluid efficiency, her movements synchronized with its electronic systems as if they'd been designed specifically for each other. "Target acquired," she announced, engaging a holographic enemy that appeared at the far end of the testing range. The smart ammunition adjusted its trajectory mid-flight, compensating for simulated wind conditions and target movement Emily couldn't consciously calculate. "Direct hit," Hayes confirmed, consulting her monitoring equipment. "Time to target engagement, 2.4 seconds. Morrison made another note, his expression growing more intrigued with each successful demonstration. "Richardson, I want you to try something. Close your eyes and engage the next target using only the weapon's audio guidance system." Emily hesitated. "Sir?" "The XM-47 incorporates three-dimensional acoustic targeting. Most soldiers find it completely unusable. Too much information delivered too quickly through unfamiliar channels. But you seem to process complex data streams intuitively." Emily closed her eyes, feeling suddenly vulnerable in the high-tech environment. The rifle's audio system activated, filling her awareness with subtle tones and rhythmic pulses that seemed meaningless at first. But as she focused, patterns began to resolve from the electronic noise. A low tone indicated target distance. Harmonic variations suggested movement direction and speed. Rhythmic pulses provided range and bearing information. It was like learning a new language in real time, one spoken in frequencies rather than words. "Target appearing," Hayes announced. Emily's world became pure sound. The acoustic signature of the holographic enemy painted a picture in her mind more detailed than visual targeting could provide. She could sense not just its position, but its projected movement, its vulnerable points, even the optimal firing solution that would ensure a clean hit. She squeezed the trigger. "Perfect center mass," Hayes said, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been amazement. "Emily, you can open your eyes." When Emily did, she found Morrison staring at her with an expression of barely contained excitement. "How long did that take you?" Emily glanced at the chronometer on the wall. "About 30 seconds. "Most soldiers require weeks to achieve basic proficiency with acoustic targeting," Morrison said. "You mastered it in 30 seconds. He looked at Hayes. "I think we need to accelerate the timeline even further." Hayes nodded. "Dr. Morrison, prepare the final evaluation." "What final evaluation?" Emily asked, though something in their expressions suggested she wasn't going to like the answer. Morrison moved to another equipment station, revealing a weapon unlike anything Emily had seen. It was sleek, almost organic in its curves, with no obvious targeting systems or control interfaces. It looked less like a rifle and more like a sculpture of what a rifle might become in some distant future. "The XM-52 prototype," Morrison explained, "our most advanced platform. It incorporates technologies that won't be declassified for another decade." He lifted the weapon carefully, treating it like something precious and dangerous. No heads-up display, no visual targeting system, no manual controls of any kind. Emily felt her mouth go dry. How does it work? Morrison's smile was sharp, predatory, entirely through biometric interface. Heart rate, respiration, neural activity, micro-muscle movements. It reads the operator's biological systems and translates their intent directly into weapon function. He offered the rifle to Emily, who accepted it with trembling hands. The moment her fingers made contact, she felt something like an electric shock, as if the weapon had awakened to her presence. "The challenge," Morrison continued, "is that this level of interface requires complete trust between operator and weapon. Any doubt, any hesitation, any internal conflict, and the system becomes unstable." "What kind of unstable?" Emily asked, though she was afraid she already knew. "The kind that can kill the operator as easily as the target," Hayes said quietly. "Emily, you don't have to do this. We've already learned more from today's tests than we expected." Emily looked down at the weapon in her hands. It felt alive, alert, waiting for her to make a choice. Around her, the laboratory hummed with electronic activity, computers processing data streams she couldn't begin to understand. But she could feel Lisa's presence, as if her sister were standing beside her in the sterile room. Lisa, who had never backed down from a challenge, who had pushed every boundary until pushing finally killed her. "What's the test?" Emily asked. Morrison gestured toward the far end of the range, where new holographic projectors were powering up. "Full combat simulation, multiple targets, dynamic environment, maximum difficulty setting." He paused. "And you'll do it blindfolded." The words hung in the air like a challenge and a threat. Emily felt her pulse quicken, felt the weapon in her hands respond to her changing physiological state. Around her, the laboratory seemed to hold its breath. She touched the pink hair tie with her free hand, feeling the familiar texture of the worn elastic. Whatever happened next, Lisa would understand. "I'm ready," Emily said. The blindfold was made of a material Emily didn't recognize, soft but completely opaque, conforming to her face like it had been custom designed for this moment. As Dr. Morrison secured it behind her head, the laboratory disappeared, leaving her in absolute darkness with only the weight of the XM52 prototype in her hands. "Biometric interface is active," Morrison announced to the room. "Heart rate elevated but stable. Neural activity shows heightened focus patterns. She's as ready as anyone can be for this." Emily could hear the subtle hum of machinery around her, the quiet beeping of monitoring equipment, the almost inaudible whisper of air circulation systems. But more than that, she could feel the weapon in her hands changing, adapting to her grip, her posture, her breathing patterns. It was like holding something alive. "Emily," Colonel Hayes's voice came from somewhere to her left. "Remember that this simulation is designed to push the XM52's capabilities to their absolute limits. The scenarios you're about to face would challenge experienced special operations soldiers with full visual capability. The moment you feel overwhelmed or unsafe," Morrison added, "just lower the weapon. The simulation will stop immediately." Emily nodded, though she suspected that once the test began, stopping would be the last thing on her mind. She could feel the pink hair tie against her neck, a small, constant reminder of why she was here. "Simulation initializing," a computerized voice announced. "Combat scenario Alpha 7. Multiple hostile targets. Urban environment. Dynamic threat assessment required." The laboratory around Emily seemed to disappear, replaced by the sounds and sensations of a war zone. Her heightened hearing picked up the distant crack of gunfire, the rumble of vehicles, the shouts of unseen combatants. Even blindfolded, she could somehow sense the space opening up around her, as if the weapon were painting a picture directly into her consciousness. The XM52 hummed against her shoulder, its biometric interface reading her body's responses and translating them into targeting data. Emily couldn't see the heads-up display she knew was there, but she could feel the weapon's awareness like a sixth sense, identifying threats through electromagnetic signatures, heat patterns, movement analysis. "First contact in 5 seconds, the computerized voice announced. Emily's breathing slowed automatically, her body falling into the stance Lisa had taught her years ago. The weapon responded to her increased focus, its systems harmonizing with her physiological state, until she couldn't tell where her awareness ended and the rifle's sensors began. The first target appeared with the sound of running footsteps and the electronic signature of a weapon being raised. Emily didn't think, didn't calculate, she simply moved. The XM50 tracked with her motion, its targeting system locked onto threats she couldn't see but somehow knew where they were. She fired. "Target neutralized," Hayes confirmed from the observation area. "Time to engagement, 1.7 seconds. But Emily was already tracking the second target, Her body moving with fluid precision through space she navigated purely by instinct and electronic intuition. The rifle's feedback systems told her everything she needed to know: distance, bearing, threat level, optimal firing solutions. 2 more shots, 2 more confirmations of successful engagement. "This is impossible," she heard Martinez whisper from somewhere behind the observation barrier. "No one operates like this without visual confirmation." Emily's world had become pure sensation and response. The XM52's interface fed her information through channels she didn't fully understand. Subtle vibrations that indicated target distance, temperature variations that suggested movement patterns, electromagnetic pulses that paint enemy positions in her mind like a 3-dimensional map. She moved through the simulated urban environment with growing confidence, her steps sure despite the blindfold. The weapon guided her around obstacles, warned her of ambush positions, coordinated her movements with tactical algorithms that computed threat probabilities faster than conscious thought. 7 targets down, Hayes announced, her voice carrying a note of amazement. 0 misses. She's operating at efficiency levels we've never recorded. The simulation escalated. Multiple simultaneous threats appeared from different directions, forcing Emily to prioritize targets while maintaining situational awareness across a complex battlefield. The XM52 systems worked overtime, feeding her sensory data through every available channel. Emily felt her heart rate spike as the challenge intensified, and immediately the weapon adjusted its interface parameters to compensate for her elevated stress levels. It was like having a partner who knew her responses better than she knew them herself. She engaged targets to her left while tracking movement on her right, switched between long-range precision shots and close-quarters rapid fire, adapted to changing tactical situations without conscious analysis. Her body had become an extension of the weapon systems, or perhaps the weapon had become an extension of her will. 15 targets neutralized, Morrison called out, his voice tight with concentration. "Emily, we're going to increase the difficulty level. Are you ready?" Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. The simulation around her shifted, becoming more chaotic, more unpredictable. Enemy positions changed rapidly, forcing her to react to threats that materialized and disappeared within seconds. But instead of overwhelming her, the increased challenge seemed to sharpen her focus. The XM52's interface deepened, providing her with predictive algorithms that anticipated enemy movements, tactical suggestions that felt like her own intuitions, targeting solutions that appeared in her mind like inspired guesses that always proved correct. She was no longer operating the weapon, she was thinking through it, seeing through it, becoming something more than either human or machine could achieve alone. 23 targets, Hayes announced, her voice barely audible over the simulated combat sounds. "This is beyond anything we've seen." Emily heard something else in the colonel's voice, not just amazement, but something approaching awe. Around her, the laboratory had fallen silent except for the electronic sounds of the simulation and the quiet beeping of monitoring equipment. "Final challenge," Morrison's voice came through the audio system. "Multiple hostile targets with advanced countermeasures, electronic jamming, thermal masking, adaptive camouflage. This scenario has never been successfully completed, even by our most experienced test subjects." Emily felt the XM52 system surge as they detected the new threat parameters. Electronic interference tried to disrupt the weapon's sensors, but instead of degrading the interface, the disruption seemed to force it to evolve, to find new channels of communication between her consciousness and the rifle's artificial intelligence. The final targets were ghosts, barely detectable even by the advanced sensors. But Emily found herself tracking them anyway, following instincts that operated below the level of rational thought. The weapon had taught her to see with her whole body, to sense threats through vibrations in the air, changes in electromagnetic fields, subtle shifts in the acoustic environment. She moved through the simulation like a force of nature, engaging targets that existed more as probability clouds than solid objects. Each shot required not just perfect aim, but perfect timing, firing at positions where enemies would be rather than where they were. Impossible, Morrison breathed. She's engaging targets before they fully materialize. The predictive algorithms shouldn't be that accurate. Emily fired her final shot, and suddenly the simulation fell silent. The virtual war zone vanished, leaving only the quiet hum of the laboratory's electronic systems. She stood perfectly still, the XM-52 still humming against her shoulder, her breathing controlled despite the intensity of what she'd just experienced. "All targets neutralized," Hayes announced, her voice hollow with disbelief. "Perfect score, 0 misses. Completion time." She paused, double-checking her instruments. "Completion time, 4 minutes, 37 seconds." Emily lowered the weapon slowly, her hands trembling slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. The XM-52's interface gradually disconnected, leaving her feeling oddly incomplete, as if she'd lost a sense she'd just discovered. "Emily," Morrison said quietly, "you can remove the blindfold." Emily's hands found the soft material covering her eyes, pulling it away to reveal the laboratory's bright fluorescent lights. After the darkness, everything seemed impossibly vivid, almost overwhelming, after the pure sensory experience of the simulation. The faces staring back at her told her everything I needed to know. Martinez looked stunned, his usual military composure completely abandoned. Hayes was making notes frantically, her eyes wide with the excitement of someone who just witnessed something that would change everything. Morrison stared at her like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. "How do you feel?" Morrison asked, approaching with obvious caution. Emily considered the question seriously. She felt different, changed in ways she couldn't fully articulate. The experience had shown her capabilities she hadn't known she possessed, pushed her into a relationship with technology that transcended normal human-machine interaction. "I feel like I understand something I didn't before," she said finally. "About adaptation, about trust, about what's possible when you stop thinking about limitations." Morrison nodded slowly. "And the weapon? How did it feel to interface with something that advanced?" Emily looked down at the XM-52, now dormant in her hands. Like it was waiting for someone who wouldn't try to control it, someone who would work with it instead of against it. Hayes stepped forward, her expression serious but excited. "Emily, what you've just accomplished will revolutionize military training doctrine. You've proven that intuitive interface technology can exceed all previous performance parameters. But more than that," Morrison added, "you've shown that the right person can achieve the impossible, even when everyone around them thinks they know what that person is capable of." Emily touched the pink hair tie with her free hand, feeling the familiar texture of the worn elastic. Around her, the laboratory buzzed with activity as technicians downloaded data and researchers compared notes. But all she could think about was Lisa, and how proud her sister would have been to see someone refuse to accept limitations that others tried to impose. The girl with the pink hair tie had just redefined what was possible, and everyone who had laughed was now watching in stunned silence, finally understanding that they had completely misjudged what they were looking at. Emily Richardson wasn't just another recruit trying to fit into the military's expectations. She was something entirely new, a bridge between human potential and technological possibility, a soldier who could think beyond the boundaries that confined everyone else. And this was only the beginning. The news traveled through Fort Braxton faster than wildfire. By the time Emily returned to the barracks that evening, clusters of recruits had gathered in hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when she appeared. Word had somehow leaked about the morning's extraordinary test, though the details grew more fantastical with each retelling. Emily walked through the familiar corridors that now felt different, charged with an energy that hadn't existed before. The same fluorescent lights cast the same shadows, but the look she received had transformed completely. Where once there had been dismissive glances and barely concealed mockery, now there was something approaching reverence mixed with a healthy dose of fear. She found Jessica Chen waiting by her bunk, holding a tablet that displayed what appeared to be official military correspondence. "You need to see this," Jessica said without preamble, handing over the device. Emily read the message displayed on the screen, her expression growing more surprised with each line. It was a transfer order, signed by Colonel Hayes and countersigned by someone with a clearance level she didn't recognize. Effective immediately, she was being reassigned to Advanced Combat Systems Division for specialized training and evaluation. Specialized training in what? Emily asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Nobody knows," Jessica replied, "but there are rumors that Special Operations Command is creating a new unit, something they're calling Project Nexus." She lowered her voice. "They say it's for soldiers who can interface with next-generation weapon systems." Emily sank onto her bunk, the weight of the day's events finally settling on her. Around her, the barracks continued its evening routine, but she felt oddly disconnected from the familiar rhythms of military life. Marcus Torres appeared at the foot of her bunk, his expression troubled. "Is it true about what happened this morning?" "What did you hear?" Emily asked carefully. "That you operated advanced weapon systems blindfolded, that you achieved combat effectiveness levels that nobody thought were possible." Marcus sat down heavily on the opposite bunk. "Is it true?" Emily looked at him directly. "It's true." "Jesus," Marcus ran his hands through his hair. "Emily, do you understand what this means? They're going to want to study you, test you, figure out how to replicate whatever you can do." "I know. And you're okay with that?" Emily touched the pink hair tie absently, a gesture that had become unconscious over the years. "My sister used to say that extraordinary situations require extraordinary responses. If I can help develop capabilities that save lives, that keep soldiers safe, then that's what I should do. Even if it means leaving normal military service behind?" Emily considered the question. Normal military service had never really been an option for her anyway. From the moment she'd assembled that M4 carbine faster than experienced soldiers, from the first time she'd improvised solutions that shouldn't have been possible, she'd been on a different path. "I don't think I was ever going to have a normal military career," she said finally. Dylan Brooks appeared in the doorway, his face flushed with excitement. "Richardson, you need to come see this. There's someone here asking for you." Emily followed him through the barracks and out into the main corridor, where a small crowd of recruits had gathered near the administrative offices. Standing in the center of the group was a woman Emily didn't recognize, tall, confident, wearing civilian clothes that somehow managed to look more military than any uniform. The woman's eyes found Emily immediately, studying her with an intensity that seemed to catalog every detail. She approached with measured steps, her expression neutral but alert. "Emily Richardson?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Yes, ma'am." The woman extended her hand. "Director Sarah Chen, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. I understand you've had an interesting day." Emily shook the offered hand, noting the firm grip and the calluses that suggested extensive weapons training. "Yes, ma'am. I'd like to speak with you privately, if possible." Emily nodded, following Director Chen to a small conference room off the main corridor. Chen closed the door behind them and gestured for Emily to sit at the metal table that dominated the space. "What Dr. Morrison and Colonel Hayes witnessed today has implications beyond Fort Braxton," Chen began without preamble. "Your performance with the XM52 prototype represents a breakthrough in human-machine interface technology that we've been pursuing for over a decade." Emily listened silently, unsure how to respond to such directness. "The question is," Chen continued, "whether what you accomplished was a unique event or a reproducible capability, whether you're an anomaly or the first example of something we can develop in other soldiers." "I honestly don't know," Emily replied. "It felt natural, like the weapon was designed to work with someone like me." Chen leaned forward slightly. "Someone like you? What does that mean exactly?" Emily struggled to articulate something she didn't fully understand herself. Someone who doesn't try to force systems to work the way they think they should. Someone who listens to what the technology is trying to tell them and adapts accordingly. "Interesting." Chen made a note on a tablet Emily hadn't noticed her carrying. "Dr. Morrison believes your cognitive processing patterns are fundamentally different from typical military personnel. More flexible, more intuitive, less constrained by conventional training paradigms. Is that good or bad? Chen smiled for the first time since their conversation began. That depends entirely on what we do with it. She set her tablet aside and studied Emily directly. I'm going to offer you something, Emily, a chance to work with technologies that won't exist in conventional military service for another 20 years, to help develop capabilities that could revolutionize warfare itself. Emily felt her pulse quicken. What kind of technologies? The kind that requires someone who can think beyond current limitations. Adaptive weapon systems, predictive combat algorithms, neural interface platforms that respond to thought rather than physical input. Chen's eyes gleamed with the intensity of someone describing a vision of the future. We're not just building better guns, Emily. We're building the foundation for a new kind of soldier. And you think I could be that kind of soldier? I think you already are. Emily sat back in her chair, processing the magnitude of what Chen was offering. It was everything Lisa had dreamed of, the chance to push boundaries, to explore the intersection of human potential and technological possibility, to create capabilities that didn't exist in any manual or training program. But it was also everything that had gotten Lisa killed, the willingness to volunteer for missions others considered too dangerous, the compulsion to take risks that rational people avoided. What would happen to my current training? Emily asked. You'd be transferred immediately to a classified facility where you'd work with our most advanced development teams. The training would be unlike anything in conventional military service, more like graduate-level research combined with extreme operations preparation. And the other recruits here? Chen's expression softened slightly. They would continue their standard training paths. Most of them will become excellent soldiers following traditional career progressions. Emily understood the implication. She would be leaving behind everything familiar, everyone she'd come to know, to pursue something unprecedented and uncertain. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course. But, Emily, Chen stood to leave, then paused at the door. Opportunities like this don't come often. What you demonstrated today suggests capabilities that could thousands of lives if properly developed. The question is whether you're willing to take the risks necessary to explore them. After Chen left, Emily remained in the conference room for a long time, staring at the blank walls and trying to process everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, she'd been just another recruit trying to prove she belonged. Now, she was being offered the chance to help define the future of warfare itself. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photo of Lisa in full combat gear, taken during her final deployment. Her sister's smile was confident, fearless, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Lisa had never backed down from an opportunity to push boundaries, even when those boundaries pushed back. Emily touched the pink hair tie one more time, feeling the familiar texture that connected her to memories of someone who had never accepted limitations others tried to impose. The next morning, she found Director Chen waiting in the same conference room. "I'll do it," Emily said simply. Chen nodded, as if she'd never doubted what the answer would be. "Excellent. Transport leaves in 2 hours. Gather your personal effects, but leave everything else. Where you're going, you'll have access to equipment that makes Fort Braxton's arsenal look like museum pieces." As Emily packed her few belongings, the other recruits watched with expressions ranging from envy to concern. Jessica helped her fold uniforms she might never wear again, while Marcus made awkward conversation about staying in touch through official channels. Dylan was the most direct. "Are you sure about this? Nobody really knows what happens to people who get recruited into black projects." Emily secured the pink hair tie in a small zippered pocket of her duffel bag, the safest place she could think of. "I'm sure," she said. "This is what I'm supposed to be doing." The transport vehicle that arrived was unlike any military vehicle Emily had seen. Sleek, quiet, with windows that seemed to be made of something more advanced than ordinary glass. Director Chen waited beside it, now wearing what appeared to be a uniform without any identifying markings. As Emily approached the vehicle, she turned back for one last look at Fort Braxton. The base stretched across the landscape exactly as it had when she'd first arrived, its buildings arranged in the same precise military order. But everything had changed. Not the place, but her relationship to it. She was no longer the girl with the pink hair tie who didn't quite fit the expected mold. She was Emily Richardson, the soldier who had redefined what was possible, who had proven that extraordinary capabilities could emerge from the most unexpected places. The recruits who had once laughed at her appearance now watched her departure with something approaching awe. They understood, perhaps for the first time, that they had completely misjudged what they were looking at. Emily climbed into the transport vehicle, her duffel bag secure beside her, her future uncertain but full of possibilities that didn't exist in any training manual. As the vehicle pulled away from Fort Braxton, she caught a glimpse of the advanced weapon systems where everything had changed. Director Chen settled into the seat across from her. Ready for the next phase? Emily thought about Lisa, about all the boundaries her sister had pushed and all the limitations she had refused to accept. The pink hair tie rested safely in her bag, a constant reminder that being different wasn't a weakness to overcome, but a strength to embrace. "I'm ready," Emily said, and meant it completely. The transport moved toward a horizon full of possibilities that most people could never imagine, carrying a soldier who had proven that the most extraordinary capabilities often come disguised as the most ordinary differences. The girl with the pink hair tie had become something unprecedented, and her story was just beginning. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.